We're in trouble now, folks. This is the black Hyundai. The Accent. The one we just did a video on. Apparently, it has done it again. But the customer states he did not grind on it till the starter burned up. So I fixed this little guy. Well, we fixed a problem with this little guy. And drove it over to this kid's house, and it sat there for a few days. And it was really cold, and he said he started it, drove it to college or wherever, and it worked fine. But now we've got a problem again. Now, I haven't started it. It's colder than a well digger's wallet out here right now. So before we start it, I'm going to go in just generic OBD2 here and see if anything jumps out to us before we crank it up. No codes. Drive cycle's almost done. Probably the evap, I imagine. When it's chilly out like this, the evap usually doesn't run. So yeah, one monitor not set, no codes. So that's good. So there's no codes. Let's see who hasn't run here. I'm assuming evap. You can tell it's cold out because you can't see out of the windshield. Okay, evap's the only one. Okay, let's jump in live data. He had to have it towed here. He said he couldn't get it running. Now today's Monday, and I happened to come by my shop yesterday, so Sunday, and I saw the car here. I'm like, well, that's weird, and that ain't good. So I pulled in, grabbed the keys out of the drop box, went inside, listened to this message on the machine. He told me he's been having, multiple no-start issues. And, yeah, I mean, it's about 20 degrees out, so coolant temp looks good. And so I went over, and the car fired right up. So I let it run for a while, parked it over here. So, yeah, he's driven at about 90 miles. Oh, no, he's driven about 200 miles. So since DTC's cleared, traveled since DTC's cleared, he's either driven at 200 miles or 90 miles. All right, it's not stuck in clear flood mode. Fuel trim looks good, barrel's good. 20 degrees, that matches coolant temp, so that's good. I don't see any weirdo stuff. Interesting, that doesn't sound like a flood or anything to me. Of course, with this ding-donger, you can't tell what's going on here. Okay, yeah, it doesn't sound like it's flooded now, so where before it sounded like it was flooded. So let me put it in clear flood mode, pedal to the plastic, see if it makes any difference. No. So there, had a little difference. Oh, interesting right there. Interesting, okay. Clear flood mode again. Back off from clear flood. Okay, this is cool. Fun stuff. Let me just cut the key back on. Anytime you're doing this, always look in generic OBD2. One thing I wanted to check here was engine RPM. Do we have any cranking RPM? Should have been looking at that. Okay, we do. So that's good. We do have cranking RPM. All right, let's see about getting this pig inside. Whoops. Alright, we want to know if we have spark. We got to make a couple little checks here in case it does start. Because that's worst case scenario, it starts. We don't want it to start. We're just going to use a little spark checker. If we have to, we can push it back outside, or if it does start, we can drive it out and see if it'll do this again tomorrow morning. Okay. And then go ahead and crank it over until I tell you to stop. Yeah. Do it again. Yeah. Okay, so we have no spark on that cylinder. I'm going to assume the rest. Interesting that we had a couple events where it coughed on us though. Let's just see for poop and laughter if we have injector faults. I'm going to assume that we don't, because I don't smell any gas. Hey Trinity,
yeah.
Is the key turned on?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we have power on one side of the injector. We should have power on one side of the ignition coil as well. We do. Okay, so we're going to switch to battery positive here. Okay, go ahead and crank it. Yeah. Do that again, honey. Yeah. Interesting. Because we have injector pulse. Okay, let me just check to see which one of these. See which one of these was power. Okay, key's still on, right?
Yeah.
Shut the key off. Turn it back on. Okay. Back to battery positive. Crank it. Yeah. So we have no control to the injectors or to the ignition coils. Very interesting. But we have injector pulse, that's strange. That's strange and unusual, man. Let's just, let's do this. Let's double check. Just make sure, because what's curious is the fact that it kind of coughs there, locks the engine up a little bit. Now remember, he did DIY a crank sensor. Key still on, babe?
Yeah.
Okay, crank it. Yeah. So he had no control to this coil as well. Okay. Strange considering it has no codes. Okay. That's the part that's a little unusual. This is hooked to battery negative. Just want to make sure we're not being doped by poor testing. Go ahead and crank it. Yeah. I don't like how it coughs there. Okay, go ahead and shut it off, honey. You can come out of there. It doesn't smell like gas out here, does it? Trini? You don't think it smells gassy? Okay. Like back behind the car or anything?
Not that I smell.
Okay. All right, thanks. I'll call you if I need some.
Okay.
All right, well, we know what's going on, folks. The question is why? Do we have a main brain box that's getting cold? And because it's very unusual, with my limited knowledge, it's very unusual to see a vehicle that has injector pulse but does not have spark. Just because they both require the same bits, we'll say, to get running. So they both require, cam and crank signal, generally speaking. I could be way off in the weeds about this, but I don't deal with too many unique situations, but usually you know, we need cam and crank to start to synchronize fuel injection, which I'm guessing that we have. I might just push this outside. I just want it to stay cold because I hate to have it run and then find out what, not, and I guess not, to found out what the actual problem is. I want to unhook this injector here. That one we know we have pulse on, or signal. Okay, that one's hooked back up. I just want to double check, just always good to do at least two. Make sure we didn't have some weird anomaly there. Trinity went back to do her schoolwork, so we're gonna have to do this a little differently. Something we can see from the driver's seat. Okay, here we go. Whoa, dude. All right, you can see that. Let me just crank it. Let's see what's going on there. Contact. So what seems a little unusual there is its blinking pattern. I'm not sold on that. Usually it's a pretty steady flash. I thought I saw that with the test light as well, and that's kind of why I wanted to do that twice. I mean, we can get fancy and dig out scopes and all that stuff, which we may have to kind of check the cam crank correlation here. Looks like a belt drive engine. It sounds normal cranking, you know, the cadence of it sounds normal. Doesn't sound like we have a compression issue or like timing would be off. And let's be honest, why would that be intermittent? I don't know. I really would like to have an OEM crank sensor, if I'm being honest with you, before we got too far, because we know that the fella put that one in. Hey, you know what? I think the box is in there. Let's see if he still has the OEM. Boom, look what he's got. Give him one attaboy for not throwing it directly into the trash. No idea if this is it because we haven't done anything. And we have RPM while cranking. However, anybody who's been a long-time fan of the SMA channel knows that you can have a perfectly good running vehicle with a crappy aftermarket crank sensor doing all kinds of weird stuff. Hondas, GMs, Chryslers, big time on Jeeps. All right, well, so let's do it like this. We've seen weirder things, man. But when it comes to crank cam sensors, aftermarket is never the way to go. We're going to pull this one out. This is the aftermarket one. So this is interesting. This freaking thing is soaked with gas. That's gasoline. What the? Is this thing freaking flooded that bad? For crying out loud, I thought the engine oil on it was low last time I checked. I know people were concerned there in the last video, you know, because it's been running rich or out of fuel control. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I thought it was low on oil. Yeah, it's above the low mark, but it's interesting. That thing smells like gas. So that's the aftermarket. Well, this is the OEM. O-ring on this one. It's all smashed. No O-ring on that one. Oh, that's because the O-ring's still in the hole. He did it. That's a classic double O-ring. Maybe that's his problem. Maybe he's just dealing with an air gap issue here. All right, well, the O-ring still sits in the hole, so I'm just gonna guide me in. Guide me in, baby. There we go. I don't like it. There's a little rust on the outside of the block there. I don't think it's allowing it to go in all the way. I'm gonna pull that O-ring out of there, plug the hole, clean the rust off the block because we wanna make sure that this goes in all the way. Stand by, I'm gonna go ahead and take care of that and get that in there, stick the bolt back in it and see what we have. I think we're in good shape. There was a lot of rust on that, a lot more than I anticipated. I actually had to get in there with a carbide scraper to get it to break off there. Still real curious though that we had injector bolts, albeit I think kind of funky, but. And then if you remember right, he changed the crank sensor because it had the code that said change the crank sensor, according to AutoZone. But I don't know if it was, I don't know what crank sensor code it had in it. It could be because of the rust and starting to rust jack, you know, just like an ABS sensor. Of course, this is a 2-wire, so that tells us it's a, you know, an AC generator here. So air gap is very important. If the amplitude of the signal isn't high enough, you know, perhaps we could have this issue. And maybe the sequence for fuel injection is just basing its strategy off the cam sensor, which is a Hall effect sensor. It looks like it's probably at least 3-wire. And it is. So, you know, maybe there's something there, but oftentimes, you know, they'll have a default strategy. Hey, we can't see crank, but, you know, we'll base it off of cam. Hard to say. I don't know. We're just speculating at this point. Let's see if it starts to cough and spit. It's going to be flooded at this point. What do we do now? What do you do now, Rocco? I'll tell you what you do. You look at the forecast and say, hey, it's supposed to be single digits for the next 3 freaking weeks, probably for the rest of the winter. So you go park it outside, and then we hope for the best. We're not doing anything with the oil change and all that stuff, so before you get all cray-cray on the keyboard, that's that. So it is, like I said, it's oils between the low and the full mark. Quite interesting to see how much gasoline was on the end of that sensor, so it all makes sense. Injectors were firing, no spark. We've got the OEM crank sensor back in it, so even if it's just a coincidence that this thing started, it is what it is. We'll park it back outside. I'm going to take and drive it around, let it warm up fully, and then park it, and then we're going to see what happens tomorrow morning. It should be in the single digits, you know, 5-6 degrees, something like that. Let's fire this thing back up. Can't believe we don't have a check. We did a lot of cranking with stuff unplugged. I mean, we had ignition coils unplugged and injectors unplugged. We should definitely have some circuit codes. I would think like a 2.0 201, 20. Oh no. Those are the only codes we had in it. Interesting. Of course, we had no codes when we started. These are all pending. So I'm curious about this 336 code. And the fact that it threw misfire codes. That's so bizarre. Sounds like an old washing machine. Go for a rip there, bud. Okay. Alright, here we go. Thunder. Oh, baby. Too quick. Data looks good to me, folks. That's just your long-term, short-term. The O2 sensor is just kind of checking to see where it's at fuel control-wise. I'm going to leave it at this for right now, folks. I took it on a nice test drive. Everything seems to work good. Fuel trims are bang on the money. Car runs like $1 million. Runs as good as a Hyundai Accent can run, I would say. I suspect that his original problem was just rust buildup under the crank sensor. That's my big fat guess. And then finally it set a crank sensor performance code. Is what I suspect the code that it set. Of course, he doesn't know because he just went to, AutoZone. They gave him a code list and sold them apart and out the door. So the guy did his job there. Now, granted, we didn't do any testing or diagnostics or anything really. We're just taking a bigger fat guess than the guy at AutoZone. But we're just trying to get back to the beginning. I hate aftermarket crank sensors, but once we started seeing what was going on, we got double O-ring, the amount of rust buildup under it. It all makes sense as to why it wouldn't start in the cold. And I believe that's because, when it's cold out, engine cranks slower. So if our crank sensor has a little bit of an air gap issue, the amplitude of that signal is naturally going to be lower. And based off nothing more than a big fat guess, I assume that is the key player for the ignition coils to fire. And then I'm also doing a big fat guess, assuming that the injector pulse is started from the cam sensor input. We could go way off into the weeds and you could hook scopes to everything and compare known goods and, cranking RPM versus signal amplitude and all that stuff. But I'll be honest with you, at the end of the day, if I come out tomorrow and it's, 0 or below 0 or just, a couple degrees and this car cranks and fires up, I'm going to call it a win. And I'm going to have to assume at that point that it was just a low amplitude signal on the crank sensor, not allowing, the PCM to see everything it needs to see to start, the firing sequence. That's my guess. If I'm wrong, and let's say I come out tomorrow and this thing just cranks, I'm leaving it parked right here in front of my bay, it just cranks and doesn't start, we'll push it back in and we have good data. We know that we have an OEM crank sensor in it. We know the air gap on it is as good as it can be. And we know that today, which will be yesterday, tomorrow, think about that for a minute, that we had no spark, but we had some sort of injector control, albeit a little funky, I would say. So that's that. And we'll leave it at that. If the vehicle does not start tomorrow, we're going to go on to a part 3. If it does, I'm going to warm it up, change the oil, ship it down the road, and call it a day there too. But for right now, I want you folks to call it a day. And while you're down there calling that, call me on the Insta, the Facebook. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, You can do it. Thanks for watching. Moment of truth. It's -2 is our outside temperature this morning. Cold. Get that door shut. Ah, great, my clicker's dying. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah. Just can't believe this weather, man. It's gonna be cranking slow, I'll tell you that. Oh, we're just cranking right up, old son. In case you don't believe me, there it is. There is no temperature today. They forgot to put one out. Anyhow, we're good to go. Confirmed fix. I'm gonna let it sit out there and warm up for probably 5-10 minutes before I move it and shut it off. It's not good to fire them up, shut them off. Oh wait, we gotta bring it in and change oil in it. Never mind. I'm gonna let it run for about 10 minutes. Take it for a little toot, warm it up good, and then change oil in it, and then we'll be good to go. So that's that in a bag of Wheaties. We'll see you guys on the next one.